All right. So why design your podcast first? There is a million podcasts in the world. And with a million podcasts in the world, let that sink in about how many of those podcasts are alive or good or even worth listening to. So what's the reality of that? The reality of that is really there's not a million podcasts. There's 250 live shows, which means there's 750,000 dead ones. Dead shows. Why are they dead? Why are all these podwrecks littering the landscape of the Apple podcast world? Well, let's kind of think about how many podcasts you've listened to that are bad or that are dead, that have no new content. A lot of them are poorly planned. They lacked any purpose, and they use a wing it strategy. Not all of them, but enough of them. So how do you not become one of these? How do you become one of the group of the 250,000 live shows that hopefully last longer than 13 episodes? Well, you survive through clarity, narrow purpose, and a crispy why. The crispy why is the key thing here. And we're going to get into why this is important, why a crispy why matters, and how that connects to actual design. So howdy, I am Kyle Bondo. I'm the chief creative at GagglePod, and I'm the co-host of Podwrecked with my best friend, Tim Bryan. And together we try to help you survive your podcast. And if you like my slides, plus a whole bunch of free goodies, please go to gagglepod.com/virtual2020. And we've got a whole bunch of stuff there for you to help you design your podcasts, learn about some stuff. It's all free. There's no opt-in. It's all yours. So I'm giving it away right from the very beginning. But I want to start with an experiment, or I guess I call it an example. I want to know what show this is, because I want to educate you in probably the most pinpoint perfect crispy why there is in the world. And it's a very popular in their niche. Their hosts are dedicated to their cause. Their content is always on point, and their audience knows exactly what to expect when they hear these people and they see these people. And their talent lives their why to their fullest. And you might be thinking, well, who could this be? Is this Joe Rogan? Is this Conan O'Brien? Well, this is a trick, because this is really the most crispiest why you can get. When you see pirates on the horizon, you know exactly what show you're about to receive. You know exactly what they are going to give you. And everybody on board that pirate ship knows exactly how they're going to deliver it to you. They have the most crispiest why you could possibly imagine. So how do you take the pirate's crispy and turn that into something you can use in your podcast? Well, pre-production, or everything before the microphone, requires you to have 4 major things. And let's really talk about how you really don't want to confuse anybody, that you really want to know what your show is about, what niche you're in, what audience you have, and how you're going to deliver your content. That is really the key. So how do we get there? How do we get that kind of clarity and focus like pirates have? The first is you need to know your core idea. And it needs to be very clear. It can't be wishy-washy, and it can't be like some of the other speakers talked about being too generalized. And they said, don't do that. You want to be very clear. So maybe you're having trouble being very clear. Where does clarity come from? There's 4 or 3 places that you can possibly go. Passion, or another word for energy, is something that everyone tells you, oh my God, I wish you would stop talking about that thing. That's probably something you're very passionate about. Experience. We are all travelers throughout this world and have done things, and we wouldn't recommend a lot of things. And we have the experience we could share to teach other people how not to make the same mistakes I made, or how to do something that is lost. Or curiosity. I want to explore a topic. I want to know things about a topic, and I want someone to join me on the journey. If you are a new podcaster, it definitely should be something that you're both good at, have experience with, and are passionate about. These are where these core ideas come from. And you should have one of these areas should be where your first podcast comes from. Now, when you have multiple podcasts under your belt, you can start to explore a little bit. But for first ideas, narrow it down to one of these 3 things. Now, what happens next? Well, you need direction, because if you pick a topic and you have that core idea, there are multiple ways you could go about that. Say my idea is pirates. What about pirates? Good pirates, bad pirates, pirate ships, pirate life, pirates now, pirates then. There's so many places I could go. So here are some possible directions if you are not sure what a direction even looks like. Are you trying to increase the quality of life for others? That's a good direction. Right or wrong, prevent the end of something good, challenge the status quo. Maybe you're trying to grow something from small to big, simplify the world. And here's a big one lately: solve a mystery. These are very good directions. So, what happens after you have your core idea and your directions? Well, then you need to know, who the heck is this for? What is the smallest possible audience? And this happens in kind of two phases. The first phase is something called perspective. And really, what we're talking about perspective is a bias. You have a point of view that is not agreeable to everybody. And that's kind of the point. And there are other voices in your space that you need to know about so that you don't get confused. You don't try to basically become like someone else. You don't want to be like someone else. You want to be like yourself. A lot of people, they stay in that common knowledge place. You want to be in that tacit knowledge place. That's where you can take two or three different things from your experience and curiosity and from your passion and add them together to create a whole new type of value. You also want to know hot button issues and taboos. What are people not talking about that you could talk about? And then you pick a side. And that sounds very like controversial. Pick a side? Well, yeah, because are you Coke or Pepsi? These are the kind of things. Are you Apple or Mac? You're going to pick a side of your topic. And you better know what the other side is so that you know who your audience is and who your audience maybe not be, and then make some rules. Do you cuss on your podcast? Do you have guests on your podcast? These are some of the rules that you're going to decide. They're called constraints. This is how the bias works. But the bias is not just enough in your perspective. You need to niche down to an audience that really is those group of people. So again, we talk about pirates. Well, is my audience everyone who loves history? Maybe. But really, it's more like military history. But I don't want to talk about Spanish galleons and British Navy. I want to talk about pirates from Nassau and coming off the Bahamas. I want to talk about pirate history. So my niche audience is really people who love pirate history. That's how you niche down. So I'm not for everybody. And some people might be on the fringes, but that's okay. I'm for these people. These are who I'm talking to. So when you are podcasting, your why really gives you purpose and energy because you have the passion, the energy to move forward, and your purpose tells you where you're going. Let's apply this, right? We have identified our core idea, we established a direction, we have a perspective, we found an audience, and it goes something like this. You've probably heard this before. I podcast about pirates to people who like pirates. Pretty simple, right? But it's almost too simple. Let's complicate it a little bit. Let's apply more detail in kind of the bigger picture. Is really the I or the who is your talent? Is it you, a co-host, a panel? And you're podcasting about an idea that has a direction, a very specific, narrow direction for an audience, which is very narrow on top of that, who are ready to hear your bias. And you're not going to stop until you have reached your definition of done, your goal. So how does this look like? How do you connect the dots? How do you figure out how these pieces go together? And I'm going to do an example sketch for you to help you really solidify this idea. So I have a passion for military history. I'm a veteran in the U.S. Navy. I've traveled all over the world, so I have travel experience. And I'm curious about pirates. I've been to places where people have been in the pirate, talk about pirates and pirate history. It's kind of interesting to me. So I want to talk about pirate history. I'm really interested in underdogs, kind of the American journey, right? Or for the underdog. And I want to tell the little known story of a gentleman named Stead Bonnet. And if you don't know who Stead Bonnet is, think of if Blackbeard is the guy in the front of the store, Stead Bonnet is the guy in the back making the bagels. So let's identify a direction for that. I like the idea of preserving history. That's a really good direction to have. And in solving a mystery. Who was this guy? What was his life? So I'm going to explore this pirate history. I'm going to solve the mystery of who this Stead Bonnet was. And then I'm going to have a perspective on that. I'm going to talk about from a pirate's point of view. I'm not going to talk about it from the law enforcement point of view or kind of a historian's point of view, but the pirate's point of view. What was his life like? How did he do that? Now, other podcasts I've looked at in the space, they cover all pirate history. And there's kid stories and games. And of course, there's that movie, Something in the Caribbean and Jack Sparrow, something like that. No, I'm going to talk about this pirate. So really, I'm going to tell the complete story of this particular gentleman. And I'm going to connect historical figures in his life. But each season could be about a single pirate. That's very narrow. So that perspective gives me, I'm not about every pirate, I'm about this pirate. And then my audience, history buffs, maybe. Military, nautical history, okay, now we're getting there. But really fans of biographical pirate history. Yeah, that's kind of nailing it. So a complete pirate bio story is an historical mystery. So really, if you think about it, it's a pirate's life for me. I'm really about the life of this pirate. I know that was a pun. So this was my why statement. I will podcast about the strange life of Pirate Said Bonnet to preserve the history of a man's journey from noble to notorious for those who love deep and mysterious pirate stories. But that has a lot of pieces in it. Let's kind of break that up. What does that look like? Well, I am on the talent of the goal, the strange life. So from beginning to end of Stead Bonnet, which is my idea, and to preserve that history. So I'm going to be very, very analytical in that history, a lot of research, a lot of reading. And my perspective is his journey from noble to notorious. I'm not going to say that he's a good guy because he's not. And then we're going to have an audience, the people who love deep and mysterious pirate stories. That's the people I'm going to be talking to. And what does this do? Why does this matter? Why does any of this matter? Because once you have this solidified, it does two very important things for you. It makes a practical approach to your podcast and a motivational approach to your podcast. Now, think about this. When you have a why statement, when someone comes up and asks you, hey, what do you podcast about? Now I have a pitch. I can tell them in one sentence what it is. When I go and put my podcast into a media host or put it on a website or put it anywhere in my show notes, I have a description already created and I have a tagline. I already created a tagline because it's part of my why statement. The strange life of pirates in a way. And motivationally, it gets me through the fog. If you think about the way that fogs work, fogs help stop you from getting from point to point. Having a why tells you where you're going. It points you in a direction. It also protects you from pod fading because in the messy middles where you run out of energy. Well, if I have a goal, which is what happens with most pod wrecks, their goal dies. They don't know where they're going. Their compass is broken. That kills my energy. So this is the protection you have. So really what happens is if I really wanted to create this podcast, I could call it All for the Booty. And it's hosted by me. And it's about the strange life of this pirate. And you can join me in this historical journey. They went from noble to notorious in the weirdest pirate tales never told. Because again, I'm niching down to those weird underdogs. And if you break it down even more, the pitch becomes a podcast about weird pirates, the people who love pirate history. My description has already been written. My tagline is the weirdest pirate tales never told. But my niche really is stick to the life of this pirate. I know not to go outside the boundaries. My filter, my energy is, well, I have to preserve the history. And if I don't do it, who will? That gives me a lot of motivation. And of course, my compass, my purpose, tell the whole story of one pirate. I'm not done until I've told Stead Bonnet's tale. Then I can tell another, then another. This is how this process works, by defining your why and becoming very crispy. And I will leave you with this last little statement here. And it's really Simon Sinek who talked about people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. If you want people to gravitate to your podcast, if you want people to love what you do, then be clear and focused, because people gravitate to a crispy why where they know exactly who you are and who you're for and what you're about. When you have your core idea, your direction, your perspective, and your audience nailed down, that is how you build an audience. And if you, of course, would like to check out Tim and I's podcast at Podwrecked, I've started a new one called Not Easily Squished, which is really about podcast design. And again, my slides right there, GagglePod at /virtual 2020. I have these slides plus a bunch of other stuff. Please feel free. And if you have any questions about podcast design or everything before the microphone, concept to creation, please reach me at gagglepod@gmail.com. Thank you for listening.